Welcome to the AfterWord. We are here to talk more about the passage that was preached yesterday. So chapters 13 and 14 of 1 Samuel 8. Nope.
1 Samuel 8.
That makes absolutely no sense.
1 Samuel 8. Chapters 13 and 14 of 1 Samuel 8.
Maybe I should have you do this, Betty. Maybe
Subchapter.
Welcome to the AfterWord.
4B.7.
The purpose for this podcast is to explore more on what was preached. There's always more layers, as well as to intentionally consider where we see God's glory. What in this chapter or chapters raises our affections for our good God. That's what we're going to do. I'm joined by Betty and Kirsten and Vince. I am Eric. Thanks for listening. Okay, here is the first question, and it's a get-to-know-you question that was supplied by our very own Vince Michael Black, and the question is this.
Well, it's based on a conversation that Betty and I had last week, based on something she did that was really, really strange to me. Anyway, go ahead.
When you fly, do you talk on the flight, or do you not talk? Maybe you read, maybe you sleep, maybe you do something else.
Like, it's a really late flight. You probably could sleep, but instead you get on the plane and you sit down and you strike up a conversation with someone.
Yep, you chat it up with who's next to you. What do you do? Are you a chatter or a non-chatter?
A plane talker?
A plane, P-L-A-N-E, talker, or a whatever the opposite
Betty.
of that
Well,
is.
the example Vince just used was very direct. That happened to me last week, yeah.
Yeah.
I'm not typically a plain talker. If someone's willing to talk, actually, I would rather talk to them than just sit there. But usually I don't try to make it happen. But last week I was on the plane and someone started talking to me and it was late. And this person was in the middle seat and I was at the window and the person in the aisle moved. And I still let that person stay in the middle seat, and we ended up talking the entire flight. But it was a cool conversation. At first, it was kind of uncomfortable, and I didn't really want to talk, but then it turned into, a really cool conversation.
Did you initiate, or did he or she initiate?
She initiated it.
Okay.
Because the plane, malfunctioned when it was still on the ground, and then she said something about it, and I was like, yeah, and then we just started talking. And I kept
Betty was if this flight went down right now, where would you go?
Yep, that's exactly where the conversation went. It's not. But in that similar direction, that wasn't the way we got there, though.
Wow.
So you are, at times, a plane talker.
Yes.
Are you a plane evangelizer? Sounds like you are.
I was last week.
All right. Eric and I talked about this earlier. We thought it'd be interesting to go through different people in our church who we know and call them out, what we think, if they're a plain talker or not.
Well, I know someone who has self-proclaimed to be a plain talker.
Who's that?
Oh.
Jonathan.
Harstein?
Mm-hmm.
He's a plane talker.
Yeah.
All right, I'll have to ask him about that.
That's weird.
Well, now everyone on the podcast can ask him about that too.
Everybody ask Jonathan. If you know Jonathan,
I
ask
only
him.
have one listener, and it might be him.
That's right.
You're right.
Hi, Jonathan.
Hey, Jonathan.
We're glad you listened.
I'm not a plane talker. What about you, Kirsten or Vince?
I don't tend to be. I do, in all honesty, before I get on a plane, I pray and I just ask the Lord. I'm like, if there's someone that you want next to me, then I'll talk to them. I'd rather not, but I'm happy to. And then also, if it's someone that's older and looks really lonely, then I'll talk to them. Because sometimes older people like to chat. Yeah. So I will do that. But most of the time, I will pop in my AirPods and listen to something. Or as people walk past, you're like, oh, I really hope that they don't sit next. Oh, not them, please. Mm-hmm. So that's how I am.
Sounds pretty judgmental.
Well, I've got a funny story. It's actually maybe not funny. I was flying back from Canada last year, went up for my grandma's funeral, and this gal, I got on the plane, and it was not a pick your own seat. It was an assigned seat. And I got on the plane, and this gal was in my seat, but it was right across the aisle. And so I was like, it's not a big deal. It's basically the same seat. We're both aisle seats. So I'm like, I'll just keep this seat. It's fine. And the last person on the plane was this morbidly obese gentleman who could not fit into the seat, and it was next to me, and he couldn't buckle, and he literally was in my space the whole time. And I was so angry because I was like, I offered to trade seats with this gal, and it was the same seat, and like he was like literally on my lap the entire flight home from Canada. And so it's like the worst case scenario. I thought, would it be rude to ask the lady if I could actually have my seat?
Hey, on second thought, could I get my seat back?
Did you talk to him though?
I didn't, because I was so uncomfortable, because he was like literally touching, like his feet were under my seat because he couldn't fit in his space.
That's
and
wrong.
So I felt, and then another time I flew to Switzerland, and this lady, the aisle was open, and I woke up and this lady's feet were in my lap. She was laying down and her feet were in my lap. Destroyed me.
Betty just had a guttural, like almost throw up in her mouth.
Were her shoes on?
No, she had socks on. She had socks on. You know, like it's an overnight flight, and she's laying. I had fallen asleep. I'm like, okay, was this a conscious choice? Like, did she decide this woman's asleep? I'm going to put my feet in her lap.
We just lost Betty for the rest of the day.
All right. Next question for next week. Are you a plain foot rubber?
Yeah.
When you get on a plane and someone props their feet up on your lap, do you rub them?
I would throw up.
I feel like I've got plain boundaries. I'm like, the space under my seat is my space, and the space under the next seat is their space. We don't cross spaces.
Yeah,
and
almost as if you literally paid for that space.
I know, and I've had people put their feet in my space. I'm like, no.
Yeah.
So I awkwardly kick them.
Vince, do you talk on planes?
It's not going to be a shock to anyone. But no, I do not.
Yeah. I try to sleep as much as I can to get it over with.
Yeah, the airport, there's something about it for me. The airport feels like it's in a different reality altogether. And as soon as I park my car and go into the airport, I'm finished.
You're asleep.
I'm finished knowing people. Yeah. So from that point on, I put my headphones in and I don't talk to people. It was great whenever I had dreads. People would walk down the aisle in the plane and not sit by me. They would just keep walking. I will do everything I can to just be in my own little world.
I feel like the fact that it does feel like a different world is why I like to talk to people. Because I'm never going to see this person ever again, so let's just have a conversation. One man showed me pictures of his children for a while on a flight. It was great. I've never seen him since then.
Okay.
Vince is actually asleep the second he sits in the seat. Like, plane's not taking off, anything.
Oh, yeah.
He's
I'm out.
Snoring.
I'm out. I will sleep. I usually sort of wake up when I feel the plane taking off. So,
how about a recap, Vince? 1 Samuel 13 and 14.
Chapter 8 versus chapters 13 and 14.
Yeah, find that in your Bible, please.
All right. Starts off with kind of an abrupt start with Saul fighting against the Philistines. That is his lot in life. And the people under his leadership scatter and hide in caves and holes and rocks and tombs. Can you imagine hiding in a tomb?
No.
Crawling into a tomb and in wells. So they rush off hiding. It seems like, we don't get the information, but it seems like Samuel has promised to come in 7 days for the second time. Remember the first time Samuel said in 7 days I'll come? So a different time he says I'll be there in 7 days. Saul gets impatient. And so he offers a sacrifice, peace offering and burnt offering, I think in an effort to try to get God on his side. So he offers that sacrifice, and Samuel finally gets there and says to him, the Lord is actually seeking someone else. Your kingdom is not going to continue, Saul, because of all of these things. So Saul splits up the men. He takes some. Jonathan takes some. After he hears that word from Samuel, they go in again, ready for battle. But Jonathan is the one who becomes, we see him as a greater leader throughout this, where he's the one who kind of stands out as the leader. The Philistines take over in a lot of ways, charge the people for the sharpening of their tools. They have the market on that. And then Jonathan, with his armor bearer, ends up defeating some of the Philistines, or at least sending them into and scattering them into a frenzy as he and his armor bearer talk through how that's going. There's a lot here. There is a lot in these 2 chapters. They fight and fight and fight. Saul's men are getting tired. Saul makes a vow that his men are not to eat, and he says, if you eat, there will be a curse on you. Jonathan is not with him because he's with his armor bearer fighting the Philistines on his own, killing 20 people alone. And so when Jonathan rolls up, he doesn't know of the vow that has been made, and he eats some of the honey that's dripped into the forest where the other men do not. And the people are getting beaten by the Philistines, and Saul begins to wonder, is this happening because someone has sinned among us? And so he decides, I'm going to figure out who has sinned and try to get God on our side. And so rolls the dice to see who it is. It's not Saul and Jonathan, or it's not the army, it's Saul and Jonathan. And so then he rolls between he and Jonathan, and the lot lands on Jonathan. So he's the one. He says, you're going to, or Jonathan says, I'll die. And Saul says, you're right, you will. And then the people grab onto Jonathan and say, no, you can't take his life. He's the one who's actually saved us. So the chapter ends out with Saul, his list of accomplishments, where he's fought against all of these armies and nations and had some success, and it lists out his line too, his the people who have come from him. So it lists out some successes, but the very last verse of the chapter says that there was hard fighting against the Philistines all the days of Saul. So that was the thorn in his side. When Saul saw any strong man or any valiant man, he attached him to himself. He was scrambling to try to have someone help him because of what his lot in life was. There it is. Lots of stuff going on.
Yeah, this is packed full. So I want to, every once in a while, I like asking this question, because often as a preacher, you'll study, you come across a lot of things that maybe don't fit in the sermon, but add color, or it's just some interesting things. Is there anything that you ran across in these 2 chapters from your study that didn't make it into the sermon?
Yeah, I mean, there's a lot going on here, and I flew through a lot of it, and even in the sermon. But the very first verse of chapter 13 is really confusing. Saul lived for 1 year and then became king. And when he had reigned for 2 years over Israel, Saul chose 3. So it's this weird, like, was he really only 1 year old when he started, but he reigned for 2 years? How does that work out? So there's some interpretation problems going on there, probably because of damaged original manuscripts. But the sense of it is that he probably between chapters 12 and chapter 13, he had reigned a year, he had been a king for a year, and then after 2 years. So there's some time that has elapsed between 12 and 13. So that's something of interest. The other thing that I think stands out, which maybe we'll talk more about in terms of application, chapter 13, verse 14, where there's this line that Samuel dropped. He says, "But now your kingdom shall not continue. The Lord has sought out a man after his own heart, and the Lord has commanded him to be prince over his people." So I think that's a foreshadowing to a couple things. One, there isn't a kingdom that will reign forever, at least an earthly one, and that man after God's own heart is what David is called over and over, both in the Old Testament and referenced in the New Testament as being that. So there's a little drop there from Samuel. He hints at that coming. So that's of interest. Another thing that's of interest that we didn't touch on Sunday was this line of priests in chapter 14, verse 3. The people who were with him were about 600 men, including Ahijah, the son of Ahitub, which we probably don't know, but it's Ichabod's brother. And he goes on, son of Phinehas, son of Eli, the priest of the Lord in Shiloh. So it's tied back to Eli and his son. So the author is very clear to say, yep, this is who it is. And if we remember, Eli was told that his line of priests would not continue, at least in terms of being old men, and that line would continue. It's going to shift. But here in 14, we do see that there is at least one who is Ichabod's brother, probably an older brother, if you work through all the details there. Ichabod is the older brother. So that's of interest. That's something that's fascinating to me that didn't really come up. What else did we talk about? We talked about some of these things earlier.
Yeah, some ideas about this vow that Saul made.
Yeah, I mean, often when vows are made, they're vows that are made about something that God has commanded of the people. So there's a vow that I will not do this, which is something that God has commanded, until this happens. And so often we see vows being made in that way. Well, here, Saul, one of the reasons that the vow is foolish is because Saul's making a vow about something that he's made up. So this isn't something God has commanded. He's made this up to try to get his people to continue to fight. So it was a self-centered vow that he made and then held his men to that standard. So it's classic legalism is what it is. He's holding his men to a standard of something that he's made up that's outside of what God has commanded of his people. So that's one of the reasons it's foolish. The other reason it's foolish is that it was foolish just physically speaking. The people needed food. They needed sustenance, and they were losing. And the other reason is that his own son was the one who fell under the curse of that vow.
Who was the judge that made that foolish vow? Was that Jephthah? Or who? Do you remember that? He comes home from his victory, makes his vow.
It's the first thing that comes out of the house.
Jephthah.
Yeah.
Yeah, first thing that comes out of the house. Yeah, I want to sacrifice. And he follows through.
Yeah.
Don't make foolish vows.
There it is. Let's close in prayer.
So your big point in these two chapters was how human leaders are flawed, and it creates this longing for something that's not flawed.
Yep.
A coming king, which is the title of the sermon series.
Yeah.
I want to talk a little bit about this contrast between Jonathan and Saul here in verse 14, because it's pretty striking. Can we talk about that a little bit? What are some of these contrasts that the author seems to be clearly making between Jonathan and Saul?
Yeah, I'll point out real quickly also before we jump into that, something of interest that the author just assumes we know who Jonathan is in the beginning. He just says, and Jonathan, like who's Jonathan? So we're not told until later in chapter 13 that it's actually Saul's son. But yeah, go on. Some of the contrasts between Saul and Jonathan. Hit it.
I mean, I think we see as we contrast 13:3 to 14:3 that Saul boasts of his accomplishments, and Jonathan tells no one of his accomplishments, and even Saul's accomplishments were actually Jonathan's. And so he throws his son under the bus to look important. And then Jonathan, he doesn't even tell people that he's leaving to go do something. Like, he's not looking at all for the fame or the glory. He just goes and does what he feels is right to do. And so Saul is in it for his own glory, and Jonathan is not.
Yeah, that is interesting. In chapter 13, verses 3 and 4, it says, Jonathan defeated the Philistines. Saul blew the trumpet and made the proclamation that the Hebrews won, and all Israel heard it and said that Saul had defeated the garrison of the Philistines. So it's not explicit. It's pretty clear that Saul was running around telling people that he had won the battle, even though it was Jonathan.
Jonathan definitely displays a lot of faith and courage, taking on an entire garrison by himself with his armor bearer. So motivated by it looks like faith in who God is, whereas Saul is motivated by a lot of fear, it seems like, throughout these chapters.
Well, and he's almost paralyzed by it. I mean, when you even contrast what they're doing, like Saul is sitting around with this group of judges, not really doing anything, and Jonathan's out acting. He's moving and in action because of his faith.
Yeah.
I also think you see how Jonathan's willing to own up to things he's done. Like when Saul asked him what he did, and he's like, yeah, I ate the honey, I'm going to die. And then when Saul is asked what he had done after he made the sacrifice, he's like casting the blame on Samuel, and also just like saying like he was forced to have to do that. Like he wasn't willing to own up to what he had done.
Yeah, that wording is interesting, isn't it? Where he says, I was forced to make this decision.
But also Jonathan didn't defend himself either. And so like at the very end, whenever Saul says, well, I'm going to have to kill you, Jonathan says, all right, go for it. I ate the honey. He doesn't defend himself at all.
We saw this last week, but man, the author seems to be taking pains to not undermine, but to show the faults of Saul over and over and over again.
Yeah, and you wonder if that's intentional, or if it's just. I mean, yeah, or if it's just that's how foolish, insecure, and all the other flaws that Saul has. If a story was written of us, I won't include you all. If a story was written of me, would people say, wow, looks like the author's really trying to make him look like a fool? Or would it just be, no, Vince is just a fool?
It's just good history, right?
Yeah, this is just straight facts.
Well, and I think, we'll see David, and he still sins and he screws up a lot. But I think what we see in Saul is that we kind of see the perfect storm of poor leadership, in that he is full of pride and insecurity. He has a real disregard for the word of God. He's willing to do whatever he thinks, and he's a people pleaser. Like, he cannot resist losing people or saying no to people if it means that he's going to be rejected by them. And so he's a perfect picture of an insecure leader. And so just because, I think what we see is just because you're given a role doesn't necessarily mean you're equipped to have that role. And so you need to have the character before you have the title.
Yeah, and he doesn't have patience for or respect for leaders who are godly. Multiple times now we've seen him. Samuel asks him to wait 7 days, and he doesn't. He takes it into his own hands. So we just see a lot of different places where Saul is a flawed leader. But again, I wonder if he is as flawed as we see him, or if he's simply human. Does that make sense? Like, again, if the story was written of me, how much of my life would stand out as really foolish and at times disobedient and all of that. So,
yeah, there's a lot going on. It's hard for me to not give Saul grace if I had been in his place, knowing what he knew, not knowing what he does not know, with all the expectations on him, all the factors upon him. I'm sure I would, and I do make some similar mistakes in some ways.
And to be fair, Saul, was it last week or 2 weeks ago? Saul tried to stop Samuel from making him king. He's like, I'm not the guy. I come from a weak tribe and a weak family, and don't choose me. He was in some ways hiding from the role. So we were talking about this earlier. You begin to wonder, what was it that God was doing in all of this? Why did he choose Saul? Saul didn't want to be there. He was, just to overemphasize what we talked about a couple weeks ago, he was a donkey chaser. That was his resume. He didn't have a whole lot of tried and tested skills as a king, at least from what we know of him.
But he was kind of shiny, right? He was tall, he was handsome, and his family had some money.
Yeah.
So at least from the outside, he was kind of this shiny new thing. Like, let's make him king.
Well, and that'll, soon be contrasted to when God chooses David, and he says, man looks at the outward appearance, but the Lord looks at the heart. And so Saul looked very kingly. He had the resume of what people would look for in a king, and David did not. And yet David had a heart that was after God's heart. And so we'll see that in a few chapters.
Here's what's it. Oh, do you have something, Betty?
I was just going to add to what Kirsten said.
Yeah,
I think you can just see that contrast go even further, like with Jesus in Isaiah 53, how verse 2 said, like, he had no form or majesty that we should look at him, and no beauty that we should desire him. Like, you see that through Jesus too. Like, he's not someone that gives off, like, on earth, like a kingly appearance, but still he is the king who is coming, that this whole book is pointing toward.
Yeah, it's interesting. I wonder, as we look at chapters 13 and 14 and the rest of this Saul, Jonathan, father-son comparison, in the ways that the king had typically come about is that it was passed on from family member to family member. And if you read through, if we knew nothing of the story and we're reading this as for the first time, after reading chapters 13 and 14, we're probably all, as the reader, thinking, oh, it's clear. Jonathan is going to be the next king. He's the guy. The author's showing us, look how strong and mighty this Jonathan is. He's going to be the next king. And I just find it interesting that even in that, God's bringing someone who it will follow after his own heart. And I think the reader's probably thinking, yep, it's Jonathan. It's got to be Jonathan. But God turns that around and chooses someone who's not the likely figure.
All right, so here's the application question you asked yesterday from the sermon. I'm curious if anything comes to mind for you all. For Israel, they were placing a lot of their hope in this earthly king. And right now it's Saul. And so a question that was asked by somebody who was preaching yesterday was, what sort of things do we place our hopes in for security or rest or peace? It's probably not King Saul, but what is it for us today? Because the nature of humanity certainly has not changed. Anything come to mind that you hold on to pretty tightly?
No. Only Jesus.
Says the pastor.
Yes.
I think for me, it's probably comfort or the things that will lead to comfort. So, making sure that finances are in order, or making sure that we have everything that we need and a lot of things that we want. And the things that lead to comfort in this life.
I was joking, by the way. That wasn't my real answer.
You were?
Yeah. Sorry to dash your... I know your hope was in me, right? That's what you're... No. I think similar to that, I would phrase it differently than comfort. It would be pleasure. Like, when's the next time I can do something that I enjoy or we enjoy as a family?
What do you look to give you that pleasure?
Is
it free time? Is it...
whatever we can figure out. I think I mentioned that several weeks ago that I'm a very discontent person, which I don't say with pride. I often am looking for the next best thing. And I think in some ways, if I can only find that, it's going to bring me the satisfaction that I'm longing for. But we all know how that goes, is that it's satisfying for a few seconds and then you need something else or want something else. So
the thing that immediately came to mind yesterday was financial security, and then within that comfort. I think that's been really relevant recently because I'm just looking to rent a new place next year, and it's more expensive than where I am at. Wow. And I just think it was easy for me to just be maybe that's a bad idea to just pay this a little bit more so I can do X, Y, and Z with my money instead. But I think it was just I really wanted to sit in a place where I was comfortable so I can just chase after comfort too. And one, being wise with how I'm spending my money and recognizing that. But I think my reasons behind not wanting to pay a greater rent weren't really totally coming from a place of wisdom. And it was more selfishness and comfort.
Well, you, Eric, what's your deep, dark secret?
I have no deep, dark secrets.
Oh.
I'm an open book. That's not true, just so your listener knows. I've been thinking about this. I don't know exactly how to answer this question. I think I find a lot of security, like a King Saul in my life. I think probably what I'm looking to is relationships to some extent. Now, I'm not a social butterfly. I'm not super extroverted. But I think stability of relationship to some extent is what makes me feel secure or stable. And now those relationships can come in all sorts of ways. Maybe it's my work, maybe it's just friends, or it's family or something. But there's something relational, not one particular person, but there's a network of people that know me and that I know would care for me and help me.
What do you think? We're all involved in lives of people in the church, relationships, friendships, ministry leaders, all of that. What do you think stands out as some of the things that our people in our church grab onto as hopes. Please do not mention names. That's not what I'm looking for. I just mean, like, generally, what are the idols of our people that they grab onto?
I don't know about our people because I don't know what giving is like, but I know historically in churches, it's pretty common for people to really struggle to give, to tithe, to give financially. And so I think people struggle to let go of what they see as their money because there's a lot of other things that they would either rather spend their money on or don't really trust that if they let go of that, God's going to provide what they need. And so I think money is a big one in churches.
Seems like in this area, health or healthy living is one that people, if I can just do the right things, the right exercises, the right, supplements, the right whatever, I'll have a long and healthy life.
Yeah, and Fort Collins in general, hobbies, I see this in our church, are a huge one. Hunting, fishing, hiking, like whatever it is, that mountain stuff that often draws people to Fort Collins in the first place. We hold really tightly to that will give happiness or fulfillment in some way.
Yeah.
I think with the student population, a lot of it just revolves around school and where they're at in school, and if they get the right like internship or job or thing, like either in school or after school, like that's going to ultimately be what's satisfying, or just even getting the right grades or the right research position or something like that. I just see that a lot. Saw that a lot when I was in school, and see that a lot even just with students now.
So to the point, one of the lessons we learned from Saul is that all of those to some degree are hollow and flawed, and will not give us what we really long for them to give us.
Yeah, that's the human condition.
Yeah.
I mean, that's everyone all the time, forever, which I think, we have to zoom way out. So there's lots of ways to look at Scripture. One of them is where did this land in the history of God's people? What does it mean for them, right? In that moment. But if we zoom way out, I think we have to see that that's at least a part of what's going on here, is that it's causing the people to long for something greater. And for our hearts, as we look at that, we have to say, yeah, I wonder what that is for me. Because it's not a king. It's not in some kingly leadership. There's something else that I'm longing for that's going to be flawed, that's going to push me to see a greater need in something else. And that something else, as we know, is Jesus.
Everything pushes that direction, ultimately.
Yeah.
I don't know. This isn't really along those lines, but as you're talking, I have a note in my Bible that I wrote that Ichabod means the glory has departed. It's just interesting that Saul is surrounding himself with Ichabod and his people, and the Lord removed his favor from Eli and his sons, and Saul's keeping company with Ichabod. And his name means the glory has departed, and so he's surrounding himself with people that are not. They don't have God's glory. It's departed from them, and so I don't know if there's a tie-in here or not. But I was just, as you all were talking, I was thinking about maybe the tie-in is who we're surrounding ourselves with. Are we surrounding ourselves with people that are encouraging us to run after the Lord and set aside these things that fill us? Or are we surrounding ourselves with people that are only feeding into the lesser glory that we seek?
Yeah, the sense I have of Saul, and Vince, I don't know if you have any insight on this at all anymore from the research that you've done. The sense I get from Saul is that he was a pretty secular leader. Like, I don't know what his relationship with God really, really was like. We don't see much description of it. We get hints that maybe to some extent, maybe he's trying to use God for victory. He had a relationship with Samuel, but maybe again it was for personal ends. I don't get a sense that this guy had some sort of vibrant relationship or desire or love for the God of Israel. Anyway, he comes out of nowhere, right? Mm-hmm. Like, I still don't really know why God chose Saul. Maybe there's that's a good conversation point. I mean, we can maybe think of some ideas, but it seems really secular.
Yeah, it kind of looks like what we would call a cultural Christian today.
Yeah, that's right.
Someone who they're a Christian. Right. They are.
Like the first altar he builds is at least a couple years into his reign.
Yeah.
We learn it here in these chapters. That seems kind of strange if he had a vibrant relationship, or at least a vibrant, some sort of relationship with this God.
Well, I mean, I was going back to chapter 9 whenever Samuel calls Saul, and the fact that Saul was unaware of who Samuel was, and Samuel was like the prophet in Israel. He was the one that everybody, all the Israelites knew who Samuel was, and Saul didn't know who he was. His servant was the one who led him there. So I think we can glean from that he was pretty disconnected, and maybe unspiritual. Like he didn't know much about the spiritual life of the Israelites if he didn't even know who Samuel was.
Yeah, it does feel like a lot of ignorance, or maybe have a couple pieces of what this religion is, so to speak, of Israel, but not some sort of grounded, well-formed idea at all.
Does make you wonder why God chose him.
Man, it seems
and
really
then it kind of
strange.
makes me wonder why God chose me.
Yeah, no kidding.
And especially you, Eric.
Yeah, especially me. It's a good point, though.
I know. That's what I meant.
That you at least alluded to yesterday. But this applies within the church setting too, doesn't it? That elders or church leaders, whoever it is that we're looking to in the church, are all flawed people.
And there's to be honor and respect given to those who are in leadership, but we cannot. This is maybe a good. I think we talked about. I brought this up last week. I'll just keep bringing it up until November. We cannot put our hope in any one person.
Yeah,
there may be good candidates for leadership in all kinds of ways, and they may lead really well, but we cannot put our ultimate hope in that one person ever.
Yep. Yeah, and so even as let's say you're newer to the town church or a church, and there can be a lot of fancy, shiny things to see in a church, but I think the question we've got to be asking is what are the hearts of these people who are leading? And that sometimes takes some time to discern. Yeah. Maybe it's asking other people who've been around longer. But if we can't get there, then it always has to be a question mark, I would think. Like, is this a Saul? I don't know, able to kind of go through the motions to some extent, but not really? I don't know. I haven't thought through that well enough, but it seems like it's really applicable within our church world also.
I just, as you were saying that, Eric, the thing that came to my mind right away was putting that back on me. I think it helps the leader understand too, I'm not the leader that everybody's hoping for. I'm flawed. I'm going to mess up.
Yeah, you will disappoint.
Yeah, I'm going, hey, you rushed
I
at that.
will disappoint.
You rushed pretty quickly at that. Yeah, no, that we're not the ones either. I think that brings a humility to a leader too, that I'll do what I know to do and walk with God and hopefully be led by the Spirit, and also I'm going to disappoint.
Yeah, and for Saul, for example, if I'm an Israelite, it seems like there's some mixed fruit with Saul. God did choose him. We have the anointing him. Samuel is involved with all of it. God has given them some victories, but we also see a lot of this really concerning fruit coming out of his heart as well. That seems to be the imagery that Jesus uses in the New Testament anyway. You'll know a tree by its fruit. So same thing with the church leaders. If I'm an Israelite back then, it's got to be a pretty mixed message. But they also don't really have any other options at this point. Like, that is the king. That's what they were asking for.
Yeah, I mean, there's another contrast from Saul and Jonathan too, that at least Jonathan was able to say, these are the uncircumcised. These are not a part of God's people. Like, he knew enough to know these are not a part of God's people. Now let's see what God has for us and how we're going to step forward. And so he puts that out there. If we stand up and they say, come here, then we'll know that's from the Lord. So he's being led, or at least desires to be led by God, to conquer a people who are not God's covenant people. So he has some understanding or inclination that there's a God, and he wants to be led by him.
When we see, I mean, I was thinking when you all were talking just about Samuel and the fact that Samuel was one who from the very beginning was willing to obey God regardless of what people thought. And his heart was obedience to the Lord. And even when he was rejected by the people, he was still obedient to what God was asking him to do. And we see Saul contrasted to Samuel early on. And now we're seeing Saul contrasted to Jonathan. And just the fact that Jonathan is willing to walk in faith, and he's willing to walk in obedience, and he's willing to do hard things, and he's not doing it for show. And so we just see all these little pictures of this is what good godly leadership is like, and this is what Saul is like. And so there's just this constant tension as you watch Saul develop and you watch his story develop, and you just see more and more and more of his shortcomings. And so I think you do see you see his shortcomings in comparison to the people that God has put in his life that are following him.
Do you suppose that the Urim and Thummim and Jonathan saying, if they do this, then I'll do that. If they do this, then that. Do you suppose that is largely derived from the Holy Spirit not being poured out yet on the people?
That God was leading, but in other ways.
Yeah.
Yeah, I think that has to be a part of it.
I think so, because I think the last time we see them cast lots is when in the New Testament, when they were selecting the last set of disciples, when whoever after Judas died, and that's the last time we see in Scripture they cast lots, and then after that the Spirit comes. And so it does seem like it's a way that the Spirit, or that God led people before the Spirit was present.
That's a good question. Oh, sorry. I was just going to say that's a good question, because I was kind of wondering about that with Jonathan, and wrestling with I don't know exactly what I'm saying. I was just wondering about that.
Yeah, Eric and I were talking about earlier. We were at a local coffee establishment, which we won't name because we haven't.
Office?
Yeah, we haven't. We don't have a sponsorship yet from them, although we should.
We should.
But we were talking about that, and I thought we don't do that same kind of thing where if I say I'm going to stand up, the example I gave earlier was I'm going to stand up and take my coffee mug over to the table and set it down, and if on the way over there I don't trip, that means God wants me to buy a new car. Like we don't treat things that way, but we've seen it multiple times in 1 Samuel that when I do this, or if I do this and this is the outcome, then we'll know for sure that God is in this. And I think there were times that God is leading, the Spirit of God is leading the people through these ways.
I feel like that's why I wrestled with it, was because I think sometimes I see people do things like that, and that's why I was like, why is this here? And
now we have
relevant.
The Spirit.
Yeah,
right?
That makes sense.
Or in the coming chapters when we see Saul conjure up the ghost of Samuel from the Witch of Endor.
I think you're preaching that one.
You Star Wars fans, be ready.
I think, though, what we see, you see people like Gideon who is asking for the Lord, and he lays out fleeces, and God answers that. And even in that, though, like Gideon there was no action, there was no movement. It was God saying, go do this. And Gideon's like, are you sure? Are you sure? And I think a lot of the times as Christians in our era, Betty, we see a lot of Christians laying out fleeces. Like, God, if you want me to do this, then provide this thing. And then God doesn't provide the thing. And then people are like, well, God said no. And you're like, did he though? I think it's really easy for us to lay out fleeces, but we even see with Jonathan in here, like he just asks for the next step. Like he's already in motion. He's already in action, and he's saying, okay, Lord, I'm moving. Here's what I'm doing. Would you show me the next step? And so even in that, I think we see a little bit of difference in the way that Jonathan is interacting, because he's not waiting for God to reveal, or not waiting for God to, in order to move or in order to act. He's in action and then saying, okay, Lord, I'm trying to walk in obedience. So what's the next thing we need to do? Do we need to wait here for them to come to us, or do we need to go into the camp? And so, I think that we do see them interacting differently with the Lord.
Yeah.
I'm going to ask one question and then my final question. Here's my one question. Was there anything surprising to you in these two chapters? Maybe you didn't expect, maybe caught you off guard a little bit in the story, or not?
I think something that stood out to me was that when they did roll the dice or cast lots or whatever they were doing, that God allowed the dice to go with Saul. And whenever Saul said, is it I who sinned or my son? And really neither one of them. I mean, Jonathan didn't sin. He didn't know about the vow. There was no sin there. And yet in my mind, it seemed like it should have gone, the dice should have landed in front of Saul, because Saul was the one who was foolish. He made this rash vow. He was the one making all these really stupid decisions. And so that was surprising to me that the dice actually landed in front of Jonathan.
Yeah.
I can't think of anything but I've been in it for a week or more, so nothing really stands out as shocking.
You should answer first.
I just asked the questions. I don't have answers necessarily to them.
That's what the host does.
Yeah, Betty, I'm the host.
Mark my words. I am the host.
One thing that's been surprising is all the failures of Saul, I think, has been surprising to me. It seems like it starts so positive, and then it's just been silly thing after silly thing. From my perspective, our perspective, thousands of years later, silly thing after silly thing.
Yeah, I guess it is shocking to me if I don't zoom way out and remember that God is over all things. It's shocking to me that this is the one God's chosen.
Seriously, yeah. Which I think is part of the point of their narrative. It drives us. We'll see this in the coming weeks. So I don't want to talk about it now, but it drives us to the point. Yeah.
Don't give it away.
Don't want to give it away.
But next week, chapter 15.
Yeah. Buddy, did you have an answer to that or no? You don't have to.
Well, I don't know if this is surprising, but I think one thing, and it's been a consistent thing we've been talking about, how it always seems like some of these things are like a plan B when we know that's not true. But even in thinking of Saul's sacrifice and then like what Samuel says in response, that like, oh, now your kingdom's not going to continue. Like it seems like this was something that caught the Lord off guard, which it obviously didn't and was the plan from the start. But I just think the language of that is, in my mind, I read it as like, oh, well, now this is all changed and you've ruined the plan that was there. But that's not it.
Yeah, and keep that tension there. That's going to come up the next couple weeks. So next week, chapter 15.
You're not going to ask your final question?
No, I totally am. I just switched how it ended.
Oh, yeah. Okay.
Caught you off guard.
All right, well, goodbye.
Keep the listener on their toes.
See you next week.
What in these 80 verses raises your affections for our good God?
I'll start right away. It's something I just said, that God would choose people who he knows are flawed. Gives me a little bit of hope. And challenge, but hope for me that he would choose someone like me, like us, to be a part of what he's accomplishing. The hope is that he's not choosing me to show other people, look, there's something better, but that he would choose people and use them in the ways that he sees fit. Yeah.
I think that he's always patient. And even in all of this, God still drops in Samuel in places to give correction, to give direction. And so, we know the whole story. Saul didn't know the whole story, but God was still patient with Saul, even as he bumbled his way through everything. And Vince's phone just started singing for some reason. God was patient and gave godly direction, even as Saul chose not to give that or follow that.
Hey, that was mine. So well said.
Yeah. Okay. I read your notes on it.
my mind.
Your mind notes.
Well, that skips right over to Betty quickly then. You weren't ready for that.
I wasn't ready for that, but I was ready.
Ready, Betty? Ready, Betty?
Ready, Betty. I think it's kind of like the point that you wrapped up with yesterday, Vince, but just the fact that these earthly things will let us down, and that's a grace from God, and we're able to see his kindness through that and see just more of his glory through that the things that we have here and the things that we try to rely on are always going to let us down, but ultimately God won't. I also think what you just said, Vince, is also something for me too, just reminders of my own insufficiency as a leader, but the Lord still uses that and uses us.
So even in a couple messed up chapters, or maybe especially because there are a couple of messed up chapters, we see the goodness and the glory of God shine through.
Yeah.
By contrast.
It's good.
That is good. So amen to that. All right. Chapter 15 this week. So read ahead. And also have a great week.
Yeah, please do.
Yes. Thank you for listening, everyone.
Bye.
We'll see you next time. Bye.